I think the bigger problem you have is that you're expecting more of people than they are able to give you. And I think that is why we really need to talk about, we haven't talked about it before, but we really need to talk about QAnon, what it is, and why it is impacting life so much right now.
Yeah, and, there have been many, I think we've made sort of passing references to QAnon at points.
Mostly.
Yeah. Trump retweeted some QAnon thing, blah, 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 at some point or another during the course of the podcast. But I've really specifically not wanted to talk about it because I didn't want it to make it seem like it was a legitimate political argument that should be made.
Spoiler alert, it's still not.
Yeah, it's still not. But I mean, like, we can at this point, people who are associating with QAnon are getting elected to are winning surefire House seats and stuff like that. There's one in Georgia. There's one in Florida. That places where they haven't elected a Democrat in decades, So it's one of those. A couple of these people are going to become congressmen, and you can argue that Trump is not doing anything to persuade these people differently that this is ridiculous because it helps him in some sort of way. I don't get necessarily why, but it helps him to be this person. But anywho.
Well, no, it's the chaos, though. That's why it helps him. Because his people will always be his people. And if he can cause chaos with everyone else, and he keeps his people.
If it makes it seem... so here's how it benefits Trump, I guess, is that if it looks like he is the sole person who's fighting up against this evil stream of, like, leftist aggression from every single form of the world, then it helps this theory that he's like this outsider who's come to break down the broken machine kind of thing. But
it's what we call fascism, Corey. It's where we have a cult of personality built around a person. And
I mean, like, this is the type of stuff that used to happen with, like, North Korean propaganda and stuff like that, where it's like great leader killed a bear that was trying to eat a baby. Like, he grabbed the bear by the two sides of the mouth and he tore the bear in half. And
ripped it in half. That's how strong he is.
The strongest man in all of North Korea was standing there and going, oh, man, I couldn't do something like that.
And don't forget, he rode up on a horse without a shirt and then jumped off.
Multiple horses. He had a foot on each horse. And he was just going.
And then he jumped off, ripped the bear in half, gave a wink to the strongest man who was like, I couldn't even do that. Jumped directly from the ground, back on top of both of the horses.
Several fertile maidens fainted at the moment.
And became pregnant, by the way.
Yeah.
They
just at the glimpse of him tearing the bear in half. It was all it took. There's new children. They're not part of the line of succession, obviously, because there wasn't a actual, like, thing going on there. But, QAnon is. I made a reference to my own life when we were talking about this pre-show.
Spoiler.
Which
Cory is the source of all this.
Yeah, I started it apparently. When I was a little kid, like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and I wanted to be involved in conversations that I knew nothing about, I would just make up things, and I would say like, well, that this is because Texas has a law that makes that illegal. And then my dad would look at me and he'd be like, you don't know anything about what you're talking about. You're just making things up at the moment. And I said, no. I read it somewhere, which is always the way you get around. I don't know how to point myself to the correct, which is the same thing that happens on Facebook where it's like, oh, I saw it somewhere that Hillary Clinton has death camps and the upper.
I love the idea of 7-year-old Cory arguing with his dad about, I read it somewhere. What do you read that I don't read first? Come on now.
What, do you have a subscription to The Economist or something like that? You get out of here, idiot.
See, now he'd probably say something about the liberal rags that your 7-year-old subscribe to.
I mean, nowadays, the 7-year-olds can watch YouTube. I didn't have those options back then. I didn't have the internet or anything. I just had to go to a library if I wanted to learn things.
Yeah, Dad, I picked up the Encyclopedia Britannica. I don't know if you've heard of it and found it in there.
It's in there somewhere? I don't remember exactly where because I read the whole thing and I can't tell you what page exactly it was on, but I read it.
Maybe you should go do some research, Dad.
But the other thing I used to do as a child, because within me, I think the part of me that makes me a writer and makes me want to like create movies and stuff like that is the idea that there's like good and evil in the world and there's good people fighting the evil that's happening. And as a child, I would say like, oh, I like Coke. I don't like Pepsi. So therefore Coke is good. And the CEO of Pepsi is like basically a Bond villain. And like, somewhere he's like in a lightning filled boardroom, like, where the lightning's going on. If outside, it's just like, we need to figure out how to kill as many people with our Pepsi as possible. And the board is like, no, don't do it. That's wrong. It's wrong to kill people. And he's like, I don't care. And then he like releases the poison Pepsi, and then I'll come up with these like elaborate stories about like, well, what you don't know is that the guy who works for Coke is the real freedom fighter in this whole thing, and he's trying to bring down the evil Pepsi empire.
So are you saying that you wrote Hunters decades before it was actually written?
All I'm saying is that this is the type of when I didn't have the ability to create logical arguments for why I felt the things I did, I would come up with things. Mm-hmm. And this is I don't think is uncommon for children, like young children who are trying to understand how things work but don't get like they don't have the experience of many years of seeing how it works to like put it together. Yeah.
And you're building a movie. You're like, okay, so if he's good, then there's got to be a bad guy, and the bad guy's got to do this stuff.
But the problem is that if your whole QAnon conspiracy theory is like Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin are in some DC hotel ripping the skulls off children and drinking the elixir that's inside their brains, like, okay.
Now, wait. I got to defend.
It's a compelling story. I
defend this particular one because, as you well know, I've kept my youthful appearance by finding every baby I can and breathing in their life force.
Yeah.
I don't eat the head. Eating the head's not necessary.
See, apparently the good stuff is inside the brain.
You just gotta breathe deep. You breathe it in.
I feel like at some point
vampire.
inside of the history of the world, we've done an autopsy on like a child, and we can see whether or not we can identify that liquid goo that's inside of them. That
yes.
Allows for
youth and vitality.
Yeah, ageless wonders and stuff like that.
And again, I breathe that energy in, and that's how I stay so young and supple.
Yeah, you don't have to. You've gotten past the cracking open of the heads and stuff like that. But like, really, don't. Here's my warning to you about QAnon: don't dig too deep, because you should dig deep enough to get to the point where you say, "Okay, that's fucking ridiculous." And then you should walk away, because
it only gets worse
from there. And the problem is that we kind of talked about it in terms of like Scientology or NRA and Scientology not too long ago. But QAnon is kind of like Scientology for like hillbillies in a way. Like it's like
it's free. You don't have to pay for it.
You don't have to pay for it. But like the if you ever talk to a Scientologist about like, like, oh, I think I'm dealing with some depression. I'm really like I just can't get out of my own head and stuff like that.
Scientology can fix that.
Well, no, it's like, well, that's not real. Depression's not real. You need auditing to get to get what you think is depression out of you, because it's really just a ghost or a soul inside of you that needs to be removed.
That Lord Xenu.
Yeah, and like you start listening to that, and if you're a normal person who's just encountering a Scientologist, you're just like, that's fucking crazy. That's not a logical. But if you're the problem
depressed.
is if you're QAnon. I think a lot of people get into QAnon with like some little tiny thing. Like it starts with the like, Hillary Clinton was secretly, helped Benghazi happen. Like she called somebody who orchestrated the whole plot, and like it's a false flag thing that's going on. And she, like the reason why there's so many investigations is because clearly something's wrong, and they need to figure out the bottom of it. But like,
I believe that. You got me.
Yeah, but you get that one thing, right? And then you slowly build upon it, where it's like, Hillary Clinton keeps childhood sex slaves in her basement. And it's just
she's
like,
not screwing her husband, so that makes sense.
Well, and then you say to yourself, like, well, I mean, like, I guess it has to make sense because, where are all these children going? They have to go someplace, and nobody would ever think they're at Hillary Clinton's place. The problem is that the guy behind QAnon, the anonymous Q, who posts these things on 4chan and 8chan,
a.k.a.
and stuff like
Cory
that.
Baker.
I should just take credit for it.
Just do it. Why not?
Just be like, hey, yeah, I'm QAnon, by the way. I've just been fucking around. And then unveil the real Q. He's like, he's not Q, I'm Q.
Ha! Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Also, though, you have the opportunity
Welcome to the conversation, Tony Richardson.
I'm really Q, and I was joking about all of this stuff. I was just throwing movie ideas out there, and you guys ran
Dude,
with
I
it.
get high on peyote and I just write on 8chan. I don't know what the fuck happens.
All right, thanks, Joe Rogan. All right.
But it's so like, I want it to be known for anybody who is now just getting into the idea that QAnon is out there and is influencing our policy in ways that are shocking and unbelievable. The best thing to do is just tell people that this is fucking ridiculous and explain to them why. And
It won't work.
it won't work, but at some point there will be a sunshine on the other side of this where people will be like, wow, I was fucking crazy for a while there.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are, they might not say that out loud.
They're never going to admit that to you, no, but they're going to have that moment.
I mean, like, I think there's a lot of Tea Party people right now who are like, I like the idea of what, I mean, like the Tea Party when it first started wasn't like a stupid, horrible idea. It was like, let's get less money into the federalized government.
But then the Koch took over and
well, yeah,
shit
and
went
then
nuts.
but then it started going like a little bit too crazy. And once they started getting like, you know, elected into Congress and stuff like that, it was a little bit too late at that point to like stop it. But I feel like if you talk to somebody who was like a Tea Party loyalist at the time, they've probably like moved slightly away from some of the crazier Tea Party things, kept the base level of it. But now they're in the ecosystem where the QAnon stuff is going to proliferate. So if you are a Tea Party person, you are watching Fox News, you're reading Breitbart, you're doing any of these like
dude who got punched in the face. And
Richard Spencer.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've lost Richard Spencer.
Yeah.
You've lost the far right because he's like, listen, I fully believe that Hitler is going to be reborn in the body of a new child and the whites are going to take over the world. But this shit is too crazy for me. And I'm out. It's over. And I'm like, we've reached this point that you lost Richard Spencer?
The worst part, I think, is that at the end, people want some sort of rationale for the upper echelons of a system where rich and powerful people have influence above normal people. If you live in Kentucky, you're just some person. You're not politically connected or anything like that. Call Mitch McConnell and see how quickly they get on the issue that you call them about. No. If I say, hey, Mitch McConnell, I have $1 million I want to give you, I have lunch with him the next day. Mm-hmm. Like that, it's not tough. Like, and if you're Jeff Bezos or any rich connected person who's able to spend money freely on political.
Remember the rice example we used a couple weeks ago, who's like,
take one grain of rice away from Bezos's incredible pile and you give it to Mitch McConnell, and now Mitch McConnell is in your pocket. Mm-hmm. And if you call him and say, hey, there's this new tax that's 50% on people who make over $1 billion, I'm not down for that.
Not a fan of that.
Yeah, you have influence, but literally everyone else in Kentucky could call Mitch McConnell and say, I don't want this. But if there's enough money involved in doing it, then it'll happen.
Well,
it's not like a cabal of Ellen DeGeneres and Tom Hanks and Hillary Clinton and like Adam Schiff has a hotel room in the W Hotel where he's putting children in acid and shit like that. Like, that's just not. Number one, you cannot try and get 20 people. Get 20 people in a room and try and get them to do something.
Yeah.
Like, this is something that film people have been dealing with forever. Like, the idea of like we're hiring protesters to go out and like act out in front of crowds and stuff like that. Like, try and get 20 people who are there to work, there to act, there to be people in the background to do background work. Yeah. It is fucking impossible. It is like herding cats, and it is the worst, and it is impossible to do. If you work at a medium-sized company, and you're trying to tell all your people, hey, by the way, there's no more hats. We're not allowed to wear hats at the office because some reason. Yeah. There's a problem with hats. It's unprofessional. We want to have a more professional appeal. So no more hats. And then you would get, 17 of the 20 people who would be like, oh, okay, sure, I guess no hats. And then you get 3 people who fucking fight you every single day. It's just like, this isn't a hat, this is a sombrero. And it's just like,
guy who never wore a hat before ever wears a hat because you're not going to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Bro, you don't never wear a hat. I didn't think you were going to be a problem. But no, you're not going to tell me what to do.
Yeah, I'm not going to follow your fucking rules. Like,
okay, all right.
Do I really need to get the boss in here and tell him, have him sit you down and say, like, please don't wear a fucking hat? Yeah. Like, the problem is that, like, so much of this ideal of, like, this cabal of people who are involved in upper reaches of child pornography and
murder,
trafficking and murder and all this sort of stuff. Like, it's just reaching you at your base. If I told you there was a story, like I knew a guy, I have a story about some guy who murdered and sexually assaulted children. You'd be like, I hope the story ends with him being in jail and dead.
Yep. Nope. He's powerful.
No, he's a congressman.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, no, how could that happen? It's like, because they think he's great,
Well, and
because he's Joe Biden.
You're exactly right. So, like, listen, I am a conspiracy nut. I love conspiracies.
Connoisseur, if you will.
I acknowledge the fact that most of the things are not true.
Yeah.
I enjoy learning enough about it that I can argue both sides depending on who I stumble upon. So it's like, what, you think 9/11 was planes? Oh, buddy, let me tell you how it wasn't planes. But then I get the other guy who's like,
do you know what temperature jet fuel burns
right,
at?
Yeah. But then I get the other guy and I'm just like, well, no, but you understand that camera's moving at 6 frames or 20 frames a minute. So a plane moving at 400 miles an hour would only be caught on 2 frames.
Right.
So it's logical that it only catches 2 frames of it. I can argue both sides of it. But you're right in that something gets you in. And I have noticed this Save the Children thing is drawing a lot of people in.
Yeah.
Someone realized, like, this is how we get people in. If you even talk to people who recognize that they're like, hey, yeah, this QAnon, this Save the Children thing is real. We need to do that.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but what about the, drinking blood or dissolving bodies in acid in a hotel room? No, that's too much. But this part of it's true. You don't get to pick and choose which part of the conspiracy you believe.
Well, not only that, like the thing that fascinates me the most is if I was, say we had a sports gambling show, right?
Sure.
And every week we talked about like, here's the lines and here's where you should bet and stuff like that. If every single week I was wrong, I was really fucking wrong.
Yes.
And every week, regardless, I had 10 picks last week and I was 0 for 10, but I come in the next episode and I'm just like, man, people who listen to my advice, they really won this weekend. Oh man.
Nope.
I came back from Vegas with my picks and $1 million in my pocket. I'm reinvesting it this week. My first pick, Orioles to win the World Series. Totally not a ridiculous thing. You should do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever stupid thing that's going to blow up in my face is. But QAnon has, the guy Q has apparently had, like Hillary Clinton is going to be arrested in the second week of October.
Yeah.
And like, then the problem is that when it doesn't happen, when Hillary Clinton is actually walking among us and stuff like that, like people will make up like, oh no, she was. What you don't know is that this is a Hillary doppelganger.
Oh,
this is somebody to make up the appearance that Hillary's still out there, but she's doing evil things from behind the prison cell that Trump put her in. And there was like the Mueller report is going to expose all the like the reason why Trump hasn't fired Mueller is because he's really working on bringing down all these like hacked child molesters all over Hollywood and the government and stuff like that. Like,
using your gambling example though, like, if you go 0 for 10 9 weeks in a row, and then you go 1 for 10 in week 10, it doesn't make you more reliable on week 11. And that's what we're dealing with.
The 1 for 10 isn't even happening though. This guy is wrong all the fucking time. Like, he's never right. And everything is so cryptic that it's like that and believe me, I haven't spent time breaking down every single one of his
he's occasionally
8chan things, but like it's like Jesus Christ, like
hey, turns out there was a pedophile ring with a jet taking girls to an island. Not necessarily the people you think are involved. This is not a Democratic cabal. This was a powerful billionaire, but
yeah, and Trump was on that plane.
Trump's on that plane too. Yeah,
Dershowitz was on that plane. Prince Andrew was on that plane. Clinton was on that plane. Everyone, regardless of your political party.
I imagine though that,
by the way, not to just wildly postulate here, but I imagine if we made a list of presidents who've slept with somebody who's underage, Trump would probably be way the fuck up on that list. Well, there were probably presidents who were sleeping with 16-year-olds when it was still appropriate to do so, and Trump has more on his fucking bedpost than them.
Using that example, I just imagine that Q makes this whole thing. Cory, it's clearly you.
Yeah, I mean,
so I'm just going to tell you. And then
this is the reason why I didn't want to talk about it so much.
You make this crazy claim about a Lolita Express and a plane that goes to an island, and then you're like, the Jeffrey Epstein story breaks, and you're like, a what? There was? Hey, I got one. But you're just making shit up.
Yeah.
And then eventually one thing hits. And I'm not going to say that's the thing, but he's been right, kind of right occasionally. And everyone's like, well, see, there's the thing. I'm like, yeah, but he's wrong a lot.
Like all
he's
the time.
not wrong. It's not really Hillary. Hillary's in jail.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, now you're just making excuses on why he's right. Like that's not the same thing.
So if you encounter somebody, just how about this? Because you're not going to be able to like convince them that they're wrong. Why don't you just say to them, I would like you to help back up this with credible information. Like,
I am ready to spread this far and wide. This sounds amazing.
Because the problem is that, like, most pedophiles and stuff like that operate within their own lockdown environment. Like,
yeah.
There's many stories of pedophiles in Hollywood and stuff like that who have these lavish parties like the Great Gatsby and, some 15-year-olds sneak in because they're like, oh, it's a Hollywood party up in the hills. And then, these awful people, these awful pedophiles, like, find a way to, shepherd them away to a bedroom and do unspeakable things and stuff like that.
I can make you famous.
Put you in my movie and stuff like that. Like, we're definitely, by the way, didn't make the rundown on this one, but we are going to be talking about Ron Meyer at some point.
Yeah.
And that whole story as that one develops a little bit. But trust me, you're going to want to tune in for that.
But don't try, I think my overarching message is don't try logic. I always just go with okay, I'm with you. Where can I find more information so I can spread this around?
Yeah.
And then try to get them to see that, like, QAnon Post Daily isn't the most reliable source. And
right.
I'm not expecting CNN. Can you give me literally anything that's
But
not?
I mean, like, the problem is that, like, a lot of these things, too, are going to be, like, the response will be, I can't prove to you. You just have to, like, sort of believe. Like, the idea that, like, Adam Schiff has children and fucking bats of acid in the W Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's just, like, I can tell you, like, as somebody who is close enough to the W Hollywood, it's probably not happening. Like a 0.0000001% chance that it's actually happening. Like,
but can you tell me 100% certain that it's not?
Can I assure you that it's not? No, because and this is the problem. Like, it's just going to lead to the people are taking advantage of these people. First of all,
yeah,
and then second of all, it's just going to lead to more ridiculous nonsense, like the Pizzagates. This is just an extension of, like, what was happening at Pizzagate.
Yep.
Where the Clintons had some, children stashed away in the bottom of this, like,
random pizza shop.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then some guy comes in with a gun and says, "Show me the children," and, like, there's plenty of incidents where this has turned into violence and murder, and, like, that's actual people are losing their lives over this nonsense. So.